My wife and I have been married for 3 years. She's perfect in every way, except for the nightmares. That night, driving the winding mountain pass near her hometown, a little boy stepped into the road, waving for help. I just started to slow down when Lena suddenly jolted awake, screaming, "Go! Don't look at him! Don't look in his eyes!" Her panic was so absolute it terrified me. I slammed my foot on the gas and we shot past him. After we got home, I asked her why she'd reacted like that. Clutching her head, her body racked with tremors, she haltingly told me a secret. The car, like a spooked animal, careened down the last of the mountain switchbacks under my control. In the rearview mirror, the small figure was swallowed by the darkness, until the boy and the suffocating mountain road dissolved into a single, inky blot. I didn't dare ease off the accelerator until the city lights began to illuminate the car's interior again. Next to me, Lena was still trembling, her hands clamped to the seatbelt in a death grip. Her face was as white as a waterlogged piece of paper. I pulled into our spot in the condo's underground garage and killed the engine. In the enclosed space, the only sound was the ragged rasp of our breathing. "Lena, are you okay?" I reached for her, but she flinched away as if I'd zapped her with a stun gun. "Don't touch me." Her voice was sharp, cracking on the last word, and it echoed unervingly in the silent garage. My hand froze in midair, a sharp pain lancing through my chest. In 3 years of marriage, she'd never once spoken to me in that tone. She was always gentle, considerate, like a calm lake. Tonight, that lake had become a raging tsunami. "That kid back there," I started, trying to get her to calm down, to tell me what the hell had just happened. She buried her face in her hands, her long hair spilling over her shoulders as she curled into a ball in the passenger seat. "His name was Danny," she finally said, her voice a shredded whisper, as if forced from the depths of her throat. "Over a decade ago, he died in my place." A roar filled my ears, and my mind went completely blank. Died in her place? What century were we in? How could something so absurd even be possible? I'm a software engineer, a pragmatist. I believe in code and logic, not ghosts and fate. "Lena, maybe you're just exhausted. Are you sure you weren't hallucinating?" I tried to keep my voice gentle, rational. "It was probably just a kid who looked like him. Or maybe you saw it wrong." She snapped her head up. Her eyes were webbed with red veins, and the look in them chilled me to the bone. "It was real." She grabbed my arm, her nails digging deep into my flesh, sending a jolt of sharp pain through me. "His name is Danny Sullivan. He's back. He looked exactly the same. He hasn't aged a day." The raw fear and desperation in her eyes stunned me into silence. The pain in my arms spread to my heart, and for the first time, I realized that she was hiding a dark, untouchable secret deep inside her. Back in our apartment, I poured her a cup of hot tea. She cradled the mug in her hands, but was still shaking too hard to drink. I pulled her into my arms. She was ice cold, a block of ice I couldn't warm. When I was a kid, our town, Redemption Creek, was really poor and isolated. She began, her voice trembling with every word. "There was this old tradition, a superstition. They said that every few decades, the creek spirit needed a bride, that a child had to be sacrificed to guarantee a good harvest and keep the town safe." Her voice dropped lower. "That year, I was the one they chose." My heart plummeted. "Then, my parents found a way. They had Danny take my place. They said his family was poor. They gave them a sum of money, and his parents agreed. The day of the offering, I was locked in my room. All I could hear was music and celebrations outside, like it was the 4th of July. After that," she whispered, "I never saw Danny again." When she finished, she went limp in my arms and broke into wrenching sobs. I held her, a storm of emotions churning inside me. Anger at the ignorant custom, heartbreak for what she'd endured, and a creeping sense of the uncanny. Could parents in this day and age really sell their own child to be sacrificed for money? Late that night, Lena finally cried herself to sleep in my arms. But her sleep was fitful, her brow furrowed as she muttered the same words over and over. "Not me. Don't come for me." Looking at her pale face, I felt a surge of rage at my own powerlessness. I couldn't even protect the person I loved most from being tormented by a nightmare from her past. I pulled out my phone and started Googling Redemption Creek and Creek Spirit Bride. The results only made me more uneasy. There was next to nothing online about the town, just a few scattered tourism blurbs praising its scenic beauty and rustic charm. And the phrase Creek Spirit Bride, or Whispering Pact, yielded 0 results. It was as if that bloody history had been systematically scrubbed from the internet. At 3 a.m., a faint noise from the living room woke me. I got up quietly, trying not to disturb Lena. The curtains weren't fully drawn, and a pale, eerie moonlight cast mottled shadows on the hardwood floor. And then I saw them, a trail of small, wet footprints. They started at our deadbolted front door, then staggered, step by step, all the way to our bedroom. They were tiny, clearly a child's. And weirder still, they were wet, as if whoever made them had just been pulled from a river. In that instant, the blood in my veins turned to ice. A chill shot up from the soles of my feet to the top of my skull. I lunged for the front door, checking the lock. The deadbolt and chain were both secure, with no sign of tampering. How did the footprints get inside? Just then, a terrified scream erupted from the bedroom. I burst in to see Lena pointing at the floor, huddled in the corner of the bed, shaking like a leaf in the wind. She'd seen the footprints, too. He followed us. He really followed us, she wailed, her voice thick with despair. He's come to take my life. Chris, I'm so scared. I rushed over and held her tight, using all my strength. Her body shuddered violently in my arms. I could feel her terror, a fear that went bone deep. I stared at the footprints glistening in the moonlight, and for the first time, my unshakable faith in a rational, scientific world began to fracture. No, I told myself, there has to be a logical explanation. A leak from the upstairs apartment, maybe, or my eyes are playing tricks on me. But whatever the cause, I couldn't let Lena go on like this. To give her peace of mind, and to find out what the hell was really going on, I made a decision. Lena, don't be scared. I cupped her face in my hands, forcing her to look me in the eye. We're going back to Redemption Creek. Her pupils contracted into pinpricks. We're going back and we're going to get to the bottom of this. Whether it's a person or a ghost, we'll face it together. I looked her straight in the eye and said, enunciating every word, I'm not going to let you be tortured by this alone anymore. We left the very next day. I told my manager at work that my wife was ill and needed to recuperate in her hometown, and he approved my personal leave. As the car climbed the same mountain pass, this time in the bright light of day, the world felt different. Wildflowers bloomed on the roadside, and the clear songs of birds echoed from the valley below. If it weren't for last night's experience, I would have thought it was a perfect spot for a getaway. Lena sat in the passenger seat, still pale, but much calmer than the night before. She was silent for most of the drive, her cold hand gripping mine tightly. As we neared the town entrance, she suddenly spoke. Chris, maybe we shouldn't have come back. I could hear the retreat in her voice. We're already here. I squeezed her hand, giving her a reassuring look. I'm with you. Don't be afraid. The car rolled into Redemption Creek, and the sight that greeted us was nothing like the poor, backward town I had imagined. Tidy rows of new, two-story houses lined a smooth, paved road, complete with solar-powered streetlights. A large, polished marble sign at the entrance announced Redemption Creek, in elegant script. The place looked more prosperous than many small cities. My father-in-law, Robert Walker, and my mother-in-law were already waiting at their front door. The moment they saw our car, they broke into wide smiles and hurried over. Oh, my sweet girl, you're back. And Chris, come on, get inside. My mother-in-law took Lena's hand, fussing over her. Robert Walker enthusiastically helped me get the luggage from the trunk. He was a tall man with a healthy, ruddy complexion, and he looked to be in excellent spirits. This was the man who, according to Lena, had paid someone off to save his own daughter. I looked at his kind, friendly face and felt a strange unease creep over me. What's wrong with Lena? She looked so pale. My mother-in-law asked at the dinner table, piling food onto Lena's plate with concern. Lena had no appetite, listlessly pushing the mashed potatoes around her plate. I vaguely brought up what happened last night, saying only that Lena had a nightmare about her childhood and wanted to come back to visit. I deliberately omitted the parts about a substitute death and the name Danny. For a split second, my in-laws' expressions froze, but they quickly returned to normal. This child, she just worries too much. My father-in-law sighed, putting down his fork. That was so many years ago. How can she still be thinking about it? He looked at me, his tone earnest. Chris, you're a city boy, an educated man, you're open-minded. Lena was just scared by all that old-fashioned superstition back in the day. It left a mark on her. I laughed coldly to myself. Old-fashioned superstition? He made it sound so trivial. A human life, dismissed with a wave of his hand. Dad, what? What really happened that year? I couldn't stop myself from asking, and at the end, I added the name. The boy? Danny Sullivan, he. My father-in-law's face changed. He picked up his glass of whiskey and took a large gulp, some of it spilling onto the new tablecloth. What Danny, what Johnny? I don't know who you're talking about, he interrupted brusquely. Back then, some kid was careless and fell off the cliff behind the back hills. What's that got to do with our Lena? His voice was quiet but carried an authority that tolerated no questions. You too. Stop letting your imaginations run wild. Now that you're back, just relax and have a good time. All right? Think about happy things. Lena's always been fragile. What she needs is to forget, not to go digging up things that are better left buried. As he spoke, he served me a large slice of pot roast, the smile returning to his face as if his earlier lapse had never happened. I mumbled a non-committal response, but my mind was in turmoil. He was lying. His reaction was too deliberate. His eagerness to distance himself from the topic only exposed his guilt. The rest of the meal was unbearable. Only my in-laws kept up the cheerful chatter, urging us to eat and drink, while Lena and I sat in silence. The whole house was filled with a bizarre, forced harmony. In the afternoon, I made the excuse that I wanted to take a walk around town. My father-in-law immediately offered to join me, but I politely declined. I needed to be alone to look for some answers. Redemption Creek was indeed beautiful, with its green hills, clear water, and fresh air. The townspeople I passed smiled at the new face, greeting me warmly. You must be the Walker's son-in-law. A handsome young man, one woman commented with a grin. From the city, right? Our town's doing great now. Everyone's building new houses. A man boasted proudly. Everything seemed so normal, so prosperous, but I couldn't shake the feeling that beneath this peaceful veneer, a dark undercurrent was flowing. I tried asking a few of the older residents about the Whispering Pact. The moment they heard those words, their expressions changed. Some waved their hands dismissively, saying they were too old to remember. Others averted their eyes, muttering that it was just old superstition and hadn't been practiced for years. One man looked at me like I was crazy before turning his back and walking away. The entire town was like an invisible net. Everyone was caught in it, their lips sealed, deeply reticent about the past. It only made me more certain that something was terribly wrong. As dusk began to fall, I was about to head back when a little kid, maybe 7 or 8 years old, ran past me, chanting a nursery rhyme. The creek spirit wakes, a promise to keep, a pretty young thing, from her slumber so deep. The tune was odd and unsettling, echoing eerily on the quiet town road. I grabbed his arm. Hey kid, what's that you're singing? The boy blinked at me, about to answer, when a woman shot out of a nearby house, scooped him up, and held him as if I were carrying a plague. She glared at me, her voice a low, fierce warning. You're not from around here, are you? Stop asking questions. Mind your own damn business. With that, she carried the child into her house and slammed the door shut. I stood there, a chill running down my spine. The unfinished rhyme echoed in my head. Don't you turn round, where the shadows creep? One look behind, your soul he will reap. An immense sense of oppression washed over me. This town, every single person in it, was using their silence and hostility to tell me that anyone searching for the truth was not welcome here. I felt like an intruder, completely alone. When I got back to the Walker's house, Lena was staring out the window. She jumped to her feet the moment she saw me, her face etched with fear. Chris, I keep feeling like someone is watching me from outside. I went to the window. There was nothing out there but the swaying shadows of trees. But the terror in Lena's eyes was terrifyingly real. In this web of hypocrisy, my wife and I were like trapped prey, helpless as the unseen darkness closed in to devour us. Late that night, my in-laws were asleep. Lena and I lay in bed, both wide awake. In the darkness, I could hear her suppressed breathing. Lena, where did Danny's family used to live? I whispered. She was silent for a long time before telling me the general location in a barely audible voice. It was in the westernmost corner of town, near the hills. I gently patted her back, telling her to get some sleep, and then quietly slipped out of bed. I had to go see for myself. I changed into a set of black clothes, grabbed my phone, and snuck out of the house like a thief. The village was silent and pitch black. In areas without streetlights, I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I turned on my phone's flashlight and stumbled my way toward the west end of town. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. The wind moaned through the trees, sounding like something weeping. After about 20 minutes, I finally found it. It was a dilapidated shack, built from mud and timber, standing alone at the foot of the hills, a stark contrast to the new houses in the village. The yard's fence had partially collapsed, and the weeds grew taller than a man. A grim, desolate aura emanated from the place, sending an involuntary shiver down my spine. I pushed open the rickety wooden door. The hinges let out a piercing shriek that carried far in the silent night. The air inside was heavy with the smell of mildew and dust. I swept my phone's light across the room. It was empty, the furniture long gone, leaving only some broken junk. Cobwebs hung from the rafters, swaying gently in the draft. I carefully searched the small house, hoping to find some clue. Just then, I heard a faint crying sound. It was soft and thin, like the whimper of an injured kitten. The sound was coming from the attic above me. My scalp prickled. How could there be a child crying in a house that had been abandoned for over a decade? Could it be? Could it really be Danny? Fear, cold and tight, gripped my heart. I wanted to run, but my legs felt like they were filled with lead. My rational mind told me there were no such things as ghosts, that the crying was probably just the wind or an animal. But emotionally, I was completely overwhelmed by the eerie atmosphere. The crying continued, intermittent and full of a helpless sorrow. I gritted my teeth, a strange anger overpowering my fear. If it really was Danny, then I wanted to see exactly what he wanted. I found a rickety wooden ladder and, steeling myself, climbed step by step into the attic. With each step, the ladder groaned under my weight. The moment I set foot in the attic, the crying stopped. The attic was just as empty, covered in a thick layer of dust. In the beam of my flashlight, I saw an old wooden chest in the corner. I walked over, blew off the dust, and opened it. Inside were children's toys, a little tin car with a missing wheel, a slingshot with peeling paint, a few dog-eared comic books. On top of it all lay a small, blue-covered diary. I picked it up and opened it to the first page. The handwriting was clumsy, clearly a child's. September 3. Sunny. Dad took me into the back hills today. He said there are shiny rocks there, and there are secret. We can't tell anyone. Shiny rocks? My mind raced. September 5. Rainy. Mr. Walker came to our house again. He and Dad talked in the other room for a long time. When he left, he patted my head and told me not to tell anyone about the rocks. He gave me candy. Mr. Walker is really nice. September 8. Sunny. Lena came to play with me today. She said we were going to play a game of hide and seek, and she took me behind the old chapel in the hills. The diary ended there. The last page had been torn out, but this was enough to send a shockwave through me. A mine. Danny's family had found a mine, and my father-in-law, Robert Walker, was involved from the very beginning. This wasn't some goddamn whispering pact. This was a premeditated murder. A murder meticulously planned to seize control of a mine. My hands trembled as I held the diary. Rage, shock, fear. A whirlwind of emotions churned in my chest. I was about to stuff the diary in my jacket when I heard a commotion outside. The sound of footsteps and voices. The light seemed to come from over here. Let's go. Check it out. It was my father-in-law's voice. He'd brought people with him. My heart leaped into my throat. How did they find me? Was I followed the moment I left the house? There was no time to think. I shoved the diary deep into my pocket and scanned the room for an escape route. On the other side of the attic was a small window. I scrambled over and pushed it open. Below was a thicket of waist-high weeds. Who's in there? Robert's sharp command came from the doorway below. Without a moment's hesitation, I launched myself out the window, landing hard in the brush. Ignoring the pain, I scrambled to my feet and, under the cover of darkness, ran for my life, away from the village. Behind me, my father-in-law's voice, so cold it could freeze water, drifted through the night. Outsiders should stay out of town business. The words were like a venomous snake, chasing me, making my blood run cold. I ran like a hunted animal, my lungs burning, the diary in my pocket feeling like a searing brand against my skin. I didn't dare go back to the Walker's house. It was a lion's den now. I hid in a small grove of trees on the outskirts of town until the sky began to lighten, then snuck back. I didn't use the front door, instead scaling the low wall in the backyard. Luckily, it seemed Robert and his men thought I had escaped for good. The house was quiet. I slipped into our room to find Lena sitting on the edge of the bed, not having slept a wink. She jumped when she saw my disheveled state. "Chris, you?" I didn't say a word. I just locked the door and pulled the blue diary from my pocket. I threw it down in front of her, my voice raw with anger and exhaustion. Tell me, is what's written in here true? When Lena saw the diary, her pupils shrank, and her whole body began to tremble. She picked it up, her tears falling like broken strings of pearls as she flipped through the pages. Was it you? Did you lead Danny into the hills that day? I stared at her, forcing the words through clenched teeth. My heart was bleeding. I prayed she would tell me it was all a lie, a misunderstanding. But her reaction was the most brutal confirmation. Yes, it was me. She finally broke down, clutching the diary and sobbing uncontrollably. But I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what would happen. Through her tears, she explained, "It was Dad. Dad told me to do it." She said that her father, Robert, had told her that Danny's family was moving far away to the city, and she would never see him again. He told her to ask Danny to meet her in the hills, just to play one last time. He said it was just a game, that afterward Danny's parents would pick him up and take him to the city to live a better life. I had no idea it was an offering. I thought I was just saying goodbye. I stood frozen, feeling as if I'd been struck by lightning. So my wife, my gentle, kind wife who would grieve over stepping on an ant, had been an accomplice in this murder. Even if she was unwitting, the fact was a razor-sharp knife twisting in my heart. The trust between us was shredded to pieces in that moment. Our raised voices must have alerted her parents. The bedroom door rattled with loud knocking. "Lena, Chris, what are you two doing in there? Open the door." I ignored them. My eyes locked on Lena. Her father used a spare key to open the door. The moment he stepped inside and saw the diary in Lena's hands, his face went ashen. Her mother followed, a look of panic on her face. "You? Where did you find this?" Robert's voice trembled. He knew the charade was over. He snatched the diary, threw it to the floor, and stomped on it, as if he could crush the history of his crime. "That's right." He dropped the pretense, his eyes bloodshot, like a cornered animal. "Danny's family found a small rare earth mineral deposit on their land. I wanted to take it. Is that a crime? I did it for this family, to give you all a better life." He was roaring, spittle flying from his lips. Then, his tone shifted, and he pointed out the door. "But I just wanted to scare them, get them to back off and sell the land to me. I never wanted to kill anyone. The real offering, that was the idea of those old fools on the town council. They cooked that up themselves. They said the Creek spirit was angry and needed a sacrifice. I was a victim in all this too." He beat his chest, the picture of aggrieved despair. "What could I do? What could I do? I had to just stand by and watch. I hid all of this to protect Lena. What did I do wrong?" He delivered the lines with tears in his eyes, as if he were the most innocent, most wronged person in the world. I looked at him and felt sick to my stomach. I was a victim, too, to protect my daughter. He had gift-wrapped his greed and his crime in such a noble package. I looked at Lena. She had collapsed on the floor, her mind thrown into chaos by her father's half-true, half-false tirade. Her mother was on her knees, crying and holding her. "Chris, I'm begging you, please just let this go, okay? For Lena's sake, for this family." I was trapped in a vortex of anguish and conflict. Who was I to believe? My heartbroken wife, or this master actor of a father-in-law? Lena grabbed the hem of my shirt, her tear-streaked face turned up to me, her eyes pleading. "Chris, please, don't call the police. I'm scared. I'm scared the truth will destroy me, destroy our family." Her words were like needles, stabbing into my heart. Was she afraid of the truth itself, or of her role as an accomplice being exposed? I looked at this family and felt an immense, chilling distance. The wife I adored was emotionally blackmailing me with her tears and fear. The father-in-law I once respected was a greedy, selfish criminal spouting lies. This seemingly warm home was rotten to its very foundation. Disappointment, like a tidal wave, washed over me and drowned me. In the end, I chose to compromise, or rather, to pretend to. I told my father-in-law, "Dad, this ends here. For Lena's sake, I won't say another word." The tension in Robert Walker's face finally eased. He clapped me on the shoulder, a look of relief in his eyes. "Good man. I knew you were a reasonable person." I looked at his hypocritical face and felt nothing but ice in my veins. I didn't believe a single word he said. If he had only wanted to scare Danny's family away, why did the diary mention Lena luring him into the hills? It was clearly a setup. He was still lying. That night, I lay in bed, tossing and turning. Lena was beside me, her breathing even, as if she were asleep. But I knew she was awake, too. Between us lay a dead soul and an uncrossable chasm. In the middle of the night, I had another dream. I was back on that dark, winding mountain road. The boy, Danny, was standing on the shoulder. This time, he didn't wave or speak. He just stared at me silently, then raised a small finger and pointed toward the hills behind the town. On the peak, a faint outline of a building shimmered. A chapel. I shot up in bed, drenched in a cold sweat. The chapel. The diary mentioned it. Lena had led Danny behind the old chapel in the hills. There had to be more clues there. I got up immediately and dressed. This time, I didn't wake anyone. Like a ghost, I slipped out of the house and headed straight for the back hills. The path was treacherous, overgrown with weeds and littered with sharp rocks. Guided by my dream's memory and the general direction of the village, I scrambled my way up the slope. The pale moonlight stretched the tree shadows into grotesque, grasping claws. After climbing for about half an hour, I finally saw it. The dilapidated old chapel. It wasn't large. The wooden beams were rotting, and the walls were covered in moss. The idol inside, some forgotten saint or local figure, had a terrifying, grimacing face, its paint peeling to reveal the decaying plaster beneath. I stepped inside, and a wave of musty air hit me. Following the tropes of every horror story I'd ever read, I started knocking on the walls and floor, searching for a hidden compartment or mechanism. Finally, behind the main altar, I found a loose flagstone. My heart leaped. Using all my strength, I pried the stone up. Beneath it was a dark, hollow space. I shone my phone's light inside and saw a dust-covered wooden box. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a yellowed ledger and an old, bound register. I opened the register first. On the cover were 4 large words. Record of offerings. I flipped to a page from over a decade ago, which detailed that year's whispering pact, in neat, calligraph script. The time, the ritual, the procedure. It was all there. At the end of the entry, I saw the name of the offering. When I read the 2 words, my blood turned to ice. It didn't say Danny Sullivan. It said, Lena Walker. For a moment the world spun. I understood. I understood everything. The bride chosen that year wasn't decided by some random draw. It was predetermined. It was my wife, Lena. Danny didn't die in her place. My father-in-law, Robert Walker, upon learning his own daughter had been chosen, concocted this entire scheme to save her, framing Danny as the substitute. By doing so, he could save his daughter and, at the same time, seize the Sullivan family's land and the mine beneath it. A brilliant, monstrous plan to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I opened the second book, the ledger, and a new wave of horror washed over me. It meticulously recorded every payout from the mine's profits over the years. The first name on the list was Robert Walker, and following his was a long list of names, covering almost every influential member of the town, including the so-called council elders. This wasn't some ancient, superstitious ritual. This was a premeditated, town-wide conspiracy of murder and profit, disguised as a sacrifice. They had traded a child's life for the entire town's prosperity. I held the 2 books, my hands and feet freezing, as if I'd been plunged into an icy abyss. Redemption Creek, this scenic village of rustic people, was a living hell built on blood and bone. As I stood there, reeling from the staggering truth, Robert's voice suddenly came from outside the chapel. I knew you wouldn't stay quiet. I spun around to see Robert Walker blocking the doorway with 7 or 8 men armed with clubs and shovels. Their faces were twisted with menacing, hostile glares. The moonlight was completely blotted out by their bodies, plunging the ruined chapel into absolute darkness. I was trapped. Hand it over. Robert held out his hand, his voice stripped of all pretense, leaving only naked greed and menace. The men behind him advanced slowly, the sound of their clubs dragging on the stone floor scraping at my nerves. I clutched the record book and ledger to my chest, backing away until my back hit the cold stone altar. Dad, are you going to kill me to silence me? I asked, my voice cold. You brought this on yourself? Robert snarled, his eyes glinting with malice. I gave you a chance and you threw it away. For Lena, for this town, I can't let you walk out of here with those. For Lena, for the town. What a pathetic excuse. Get him, he ordered. The villagers surged forward like a pack of hungry wolves. I grabbed a broken wooden beam from the floor, ready to fight for my life. In that split second, the chapel's single oil lamp, which had burned for years, suddenly sputtered and died. An ice-cold wind howled from behind the altar, kicking up dust and prayer papers, blinding everyone. Ack! It's a ghost. The villagers panicked. Guilty as they were, they feared divine or supernatural retribution more than anything. Some dropped their weapons and ran, screaming. Others fell to their knees, bowing frantically to the darkened altar. It was Danny. I knew it. It was Danny's lingering spirit, helping me. Seizing the moment of chaos, I burst through a gap in the crowd like a cornered cat. Don't let him get away. Grab him. Robert was the first to recover, his voice a desperate roar behind me. If he escapes, we're all finished. I didn't dare look back. I ran for my life, scrambling down the dark hillside. The sounds of shouting and pursuit grew closer. I reached the mountain road where I'd first arrived, but I could hear them closing in. Just as despair began to set in, a pair of blinding headlights cut through the darkness from around a bend. A black SUV screeched to a halt right in front of me. The window rolled down. The driver was a middle-aged man with a weathered face and a determined expression. He yelled, "Get in." I didn't hesitate. I yanked the door open and leaped inside. The engine roared, and the vehicle shot forward, leaving the pursuing villagers far behind. I didn't relax until their figures had vanished from the rearview mirror. I collapsed against the seat, gasping for air. Who are you?" I asked, looking warily at the man beside me. He glanced at me in the mirror and handed me a bottle of water. "My name is Mark Sullivan," he said. "Danny was my nephew." My heart seized. Mark sighed, his eyes filled with a mixture of grief and rage. My brother, his wife, and my nephew. They just vanished one day. The whole town said it was an accident. I never believed it. He explained that his brother, David Sullivan, was a simple, honest man, but he was cautious. There was no way all three of them would have accidentally fallen from a cliff at the same time. He knew something was wrong, but he was alone and powerless in the town, so he had to leave. For years, he'd worked odd jobs, saving money and quietly investigating what happened. "I always suspected it was Robert Walker," Mark said. "He was the one who convinced my brother to lease that land, said they were going to develop it together. After the accident, the land just fell into his hands. He had only recently returned to the area, keeping a close watch on Redemption Creek. Last night, he'd seen me go to his brother's old house, and tonight, when he saw Robert Walker lead a mob up the hill, he knew something was up and followed. He had no idea he'd end up saving my life." I looked at this man, his face etched with years of hardship, and felt a rush of complex emotions. After the betrayals and the chase, I had finally found an ally. I pulled the record book and ledger from my jacket and handed them to him. Mark took them and began to read, page by page. His hands started to shake, his eyes growing redder and redder. When he saw the ledger of payouts, filled with familiar names, the stoic man finally slammed his fist against the steering wheel, letting out a choked, furious roar. "Bastards! A bunch of goddamn bastards!" He was overcome with grief and fury, tears streaming down his face. The truth he had suspected for years was finally confirmed in the most brutal way. The car was filled with a heavy air of sorrow and rage. We decided to team up. I had the evidence and he knew the town. Mark told me that he knew a few of the original villagers who had been forced out after complaining about their small share of the profits. They hated Robert and might be willing to testify. My job was to turn the most critical person in this whole affair. My wife, Lena. I had to tell her the whole truth. I had to free her from the cage of guilt and twisted family loyalty that had imprisoned her for so long. Mark and I laid out a plan. He would drive to the neighboring states to find the exiled villagers, while I would sneak back into town to get to Lena. We agreed to communicate using a single burner phone. That night, under the cover of darkness, I snuck back to the Walker's house. I was getting good at this. I went around to the back and climbed up to our bedroom window. The light was on. Lena was awake, sitting at her vanity, staring blankly at her own reflection. Tear tracks still stained her cheeks. I tapped gently on the glass. She jumped, then turned. A flash of relief crossed her face when she saw me, quickly replaced by fear and worry. She rushed over and unlatched the window. "Chris, you're okay. Where did you go?" "My dad. I placed a finger on her lips, shushing her. Once inside, I locked the door behind me. I didn't waste any time. I placed the old record of offerings, the one with her name in it, on the vanity in front of her. "See for yourself," I said. Lena picked up the yellowed book. When she saw her own name written next to the word, offering, she froze. The book slipped from her grasp and fell to the floor with a soft thud. The color drained from her face, leaving it a ghastly white. What? What is this? She stammered. It's the truth, I said, looking her in the eye and speaking each word with precision. You were never the one at fault. You were a survivor. The person who was supposed to be sacrificed that year was you. I told her everything, that her father, the man who claimed he did everything for her, wasn't protecting her. He was using her guilt and fear as a shield to cover up his own monstrous crime. Murdering a child to save his daughter and seize a fortune. No, that's impossible, Lena whispered, shaking her head violently, unable to accept the cruel reality. She had lived her entire adult life in the shadow of the belief that Danny had died for her. That guilt was the root of all her nightmares. And now, I was telling her that she was the one who was almost pushed onto the sacrificial altar. The reversal of her role in the tragedy was devastating. Just then, we heard her mother's voice from outside the door. Lena, are you asleep? We both froze. Her mother tried the doorknob and found it locked. Lena, honey, open up. I brought you some chamomile tea. I put a finger to my lips and pulled Lena behind the curtains. A moment later, we heard the sound of a key in the lock. Her mother came in, and her eyes immediately fell on me, and then on the record book lying on the floor. She let out a piercing scream. The tray in her hands crashed to the ground, shattering the mug. Chris, you? How dare you come back? She shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at me. I ignored her, my eyes fixed on Lena. This was a choice she had to make for herself, to keep living a lie or to face the truth. Suddenly, her mother rushed forward and fell to her knees in front of us, clutching Lena's legs and sobbing. Lena, Chris, I'm begging you, please, spare your father. Everything he did it for you. She cried hysterically, then dragged a heavy wooden chest out from under the bed. She opened it. Inside, lying on a bed of silk, was a red dress. It was an old-fashioned, ceremonial gown, exquisitely embroidered with intricate golden patterns that shimmered eerily in the lamplight. This is the truth. Her mother wept. She explained that years ago, the town had suffered a terrible drought. The elders claimed the creek spirit was angry and needed a girl with a specific astrological chart, a water sign, to appease it. After consulting their charts, they determined that only Lena fit the profile in the entire village. Your father was going out of his mind, she sobbed. He couldn't just watch you die. He wanted to run away with you. But the whole town was watching our house. We couldn't escape. It was when Robert was at his most desperate that he learned about the minerals on the Sullivan's land. A wicked plan began to form in his mind. He approached Danny's parents, lying that a big city developer wanted to buy their land for a high price, and gave them a huge sum of money to keep quiet and prepare to move, lulling them into a false sense of security. At the same time, he spread rumors among his trusted allies in town that Danny's own chart was so strong it could overpower Lena's and serve as an even better offering to placate the spirit's anger. With money and lies, he had orchestrated the entire tragedy. His paternal love was built on the ruins of another family. Lena stared at the blood-red dress that should have been hers. Her expression shifted from confusion to shock, to agony, and finally, to a dead, hollow emptiness. The towering statue of her father in her mind crumbled to dust. She slowly stood up and walked to her mother. She didn't help her up. She just looked down at her and asked, her voice a chilling monotone I had never heard before. So, for all these years, you watched me suffer through nightmares, you watched me live with this guilt, and you were fine with it? Her mother was speechless, able to do nothing but bow her head in shame. Lena laughed, a sound more painful than any cry. So I wasn't an accomplice. She turned and looked at me. I was just a living shield you pushed forward to shut everyone up. In that instant, her eyes changed. The soft, sensitive, kind Lena was gone. In her place stood an avenger, forged in the fires of hatred and betrayal. From that day on, Lena was a different person. The tears and the terror vanished. Her face settled into a mask of calm, so profound it was chilling. We devised a meticulous plan. Lena pretended to have been won over by her mother's pleas. She told Robert that I had run off for good and promised she would keep their secret forever, asking only that the family could live in peace. Robert was suspicious, but seeing his daughter's apparent submissiveness, he let his guard down. He did, however, assign 2 villagers to protect her, a transparent attempt to keep her under surveillance. Meanwhile, I holed up in the apartment Mark had rented in the next county and began my counterattack. Using my skills as a programmer, I started trying to restore the final, torn-out page of Danny's diary. The paper was shredded, but I saw a faint hope in the remaining fibers and indentations. I scanned the fragments with a high-resolution scanner and wrote a small program to piece them together using image recognition and algorithmic reconstruction. It was painstaking work. I spent 3 days and nights glued to my computer screen. Finally, on the morning of the 4th day, the torn words miraculously materialized on my monitor. Mr. Walker told me to go play with Lena in the hills. He gave me a new slingshot and said we were going to be one big family now. That was it, the direct evidence of Robert Walker luring Danny to his doom. At the same time, I got good news from Mark. He had found one of the old-timers who had been forced out of the village after a dispute over the mine's profits. His name was Frank Peterson. Frank harbored a deep-seated hatred for Robert Walker. When he heard our plan, he immediately agreed to testify, to detail how Robert had manipulated the entire offering ritual through threats and bribery. The chain of evidence was solidifying. We now had physical evidence, Danny's diary, the offering record, the payment ledger, a witness, Frank Peterson. We were missing just one thing, a confession from Robert Walker himself in his own words. I bought a state-of-the-art micro-recorder, disguised as a fountain pen, and had Mark find a way to secretly get it to Lena. The opportunity came sooner than expected, to celebrate the removal of the threat that was me, and to quell some rising unease in the village. Robert decided to host a large dinner party at his house. After several rounds of drinks, Robert was visibly intoxicated. Lena found a moment to pull him into his study alone. Feigning lingering fear, she said, "Dad, even though Chris is gone, I'm still scared. What if he comes back one day?" Slurring his words, Robert thumped his chest. "Don't worry, he's not coming back. And even if he does, he has no proof. I burned that diary to ashes." Lena pressed him. "But the Sullivan's mine." The mention of the mine sobered him slightly. He lowered his voice, a hint of pride and smugness creeping in. "It was always meant to be ours. It was the will of the Creek spirit. That Sullivan kid, he was just born to take the fall. I was just following fate. Besides," he added, "everyone in this town got a piece of the pie. Who would dare talk? Anyone who talks is an enemy of the whole town." The fountain pen in Lena's pocket recorded every single word. All the evidence was collected. A web of vengeance had been quietly woven. Now all we needed was a stage to expose the crime to the world. Claiming she was still deeply unsettled and needed to make peace with the spirit, Lena suggested to Robert that this year's town festival, the one honoring the Creek spirit, be grander than ever before. She made a special request, that her respected father personally preside over the ceremony. Robert, eager to use the occasion to solidify his status as the town's leader and pacify the community, agreed without a second thought. He had no idea that the stage he was so eagerly building would become the site of his own judgment. The festival was set for 3 days later. The final battle was about to begin. On the day of the festival, the town's community hall was packed. The hall was newly renovated, grand and impressive, with a grim-looking statue of the so-called Creek spirit at its center. The townspeople were dressed in their Sunday best, their faces beaming as if celebrating a holiday. They either didn't know or chose to forget that their prosperity was bought with the life of an 8-year-old boy. Dressed in a crisp, new blazer, Robert Walker stood at the podium, his face flushed with self-importance. As the master of ceremonies, he was delivering a rousing speech about how he had led the town to prosperity, how they had earned the spirit's blessing, ensuring years of peace and good fortune. His passionate delivery was met with waves of applause and cheers. I stood at the back of the crowd, wearing a baseball cap and a face mask, watching the sanctimonious hypocrite on stage with cold fury. The ceremony was halfway through, reaching the climactic reverence part of the ritual. Just as Robert was about to light the ceremonial incense, I pressed a button on the remote in my pocket. A white screen, which I'd had Mark set up earlier, dropped down from the wall. A second later, the projector I'd brought sprang to life, casting the words from Danny's heartbreaking diary onto the screen for all to see. "Dad said there are shiny rocks in the hills, and there are secret. Mr. Walker comes to our house a lot. He told me not to tell anyone about the rocks. Lena said we were going to play hide and seek, and she took me to the hills. Mr. Walker told me to go play with Lena in the hills. He gave me a new slingshot and said we were going to be one big family now." The hall fell silent. Everyone stared, dumbfounded, at the projected words. The festive atmosphere evaporated, replaced by a chilling stillness. The color drained from Robert's face. "What is this nonsense? Turn it off. Somebody turn that thing off," he shrieked, denying everything, claiming it was a slanderous attempt to disrupt the town's harmony. Just then, the main doors of the hall swung open. Mark Sullivan entered, supporting the frail Frank Peterson. "Robert Walker, do you remember me?" Frank pointed a trembling finger at him. "Years ago, wasn't it you who told us that Danny's chart was strong enough to die in Lena's place? Wasn't it you who took the lion's share of the mine's profits, gave us scraps, and then drove anyone who complained out of town?" Robert was cornered, enraged. He tried to incite the villagers who had benefited from his scheme. "Don't listen to them. They're outsiders, jealous of our success, trying to blackmail us. Get them out of here." A few men, whose fortunes were most closely tied to Robert's, started moving toward us, their faces hostile. The crowd began to stir, and the scene teetered on the edge of chaos. And then, a clear, cold voice cut through the noise. "Who, exactly, is the outsider here?" Every head turned. Lena emerged from a side door, walking slowly toward the stage. She was wearing the blood-red ceremonial dress that should have been hers. Her face was made up, her lips a shocking crimson against her deathly pale skin. She looked like a vengeful bride, risen from the grave, beautiful and terrifying. The entire hall fell into a dead silence, stunned by her appearance. Lena walked to the center of the stage and stood beside her father. She looked out at the sea of familiar yet alien faces, and tears streamed down her cheeks, carving two stark paths on her pale face. "Today, I am the true offering," she said, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "On behalf of Danny Sullivan, I've come to collect a debt." As she finished speaking, I hit play on the audio system. Robert's confession from the study boomed through the hall's speakers. "That Sullivan kid, he was just born to take the fall. I was just following fate. Besides, everyone in this town got a piece of the pie. Who would dare talk?" Simultaneously, I projected the images of the payment ledger onto the screen, one page after another. Robert Walker, 40% share. Mayor John Riley, 10% share. Councilman Bill Tanner, 5% share. Name after name, debt after bloody debt, displayed in stark, irrefutable detail. The crowd exploded. The evidence was undeniable. The villagers' wall of denial crumbled. Those who had received smaller shares or nothing at all were the first to turn. "Robert Walker, you son of a bitch. You told us the offering was for the good of the town, but it was to line your own pockets. We kept your damn secret for years, and this is what we got. You greedy bastard. A life for a life. Give us back the mine." Accusations and curses flew from all directions. Former conspirators now turned on each other, tearing at each other like rabid dogs. Robert looked out at the faces that once revered him, now contorted with a desire to tear him limb from limb. He was utterly alone. His mind seemed to snap. His eyes wild and bloodshot, he started screaming. "It was for the good of the town. Everything I did was for the town." He lunged at Lena like a madman, trying to rip the glaring red dress from her body. "Take it off! Take it off!" I shot forward and tackled him, pinning him to the floor with all my strength. He thrashed beneath me, letting out animalistic snarls. Just then, the main doors of the hall were thrown open with a crash. A team of uniformed police officers flooded the room. We had called them in advance, and they had been waiting outside. "Nobody move! Police!" Robert Walker, along with every key person named in the ledger, was handcuffed, one by one. A crime that had been buried for more than a decade was finally brought to light. I helped Lena to her feet and led her out of that sickening hall. The sunlight outside was bright, almost painful. In the distance, under a large oak tree, we thought we saw a small boy in a clean white shirt. He wasn't the grim-faced child from the mountain road. He looked at us and gave a bright, relieved smile. He waved, and then his form dissolved into 1,000 specks of golden light, vanishing in the sun. The spirit, trapped for so long, was finally at peace. Lena covered her mouth, fresh tears streaming down her face. But this time they were tears of release. We got into Mark's car and slowly drove away from Redemption Creek. As we passed over the same mountain pass, the sun shone brightly, spilling through the windows and warming our skin. The road ahead was clear, with no more shadows. The trial was swift, faced with a mountain of evidence. Everyone confessed. Robert Walker, as the mastermind, was found guilty of murder, illegal mining, and embezzlement, among other charges. He was sentenced to life in prison. The others received sentences corresponding to their level of involvement. The mine was seized by the state, and a portion of its future revenue was allocated to Mark Sullivan as restitution. I went with Lena to the prison to see Robert one last time. In just a few months, he had aged 20 years. His hair was completely white, and the arrogant authority was gone. Through the thick glass partition, he looked at Lena, and late, useless tears of remorse streamed from his cloudy eyes. "Lena, I'm sorry. Dad was wrong." Lena didn't answer. She just looked at him with an expression of absolute calm. There was no hatred in her eyes, but no love, either. Only a vast emptiness. She watched him for a full minute before taking my hand and turning away without a word. Some mistakes can't be fixed with an apology. Some wounds, once inflicted, can never truly heal. Her mother was given a suspended sentence for acting as an accessory. After her release, she tried to give us all of her assets as compensation. We refused. We wouldn't touch a penny of that blood money. The only thing we took from that house was an old photo album from Lena's childhood. With our own savings, Lena and I started a small charitable foundation in Danny's name. It provides aid to children in rural areas who have lost access to education due to family tragedies. It felt like the only thing we could do for the innocent boy who had lost his life. Lena began seeing a therapist regularly. With professional help, the nightmares that had plagued her for over a decade gradually faded away. We sold our condo in the city, leaving behind the place filled with so many oppressive memories. We moved to a small, warm coastal town to start our new life. 1 year later, the salt-laced sea breeze, tasting of sunshine, brushed against our faces. Lena was pregnant, her belly just beginning to show. We walked hand in hand, barefoot, on the soft sand. The setting sun stretched our shadows long behind us. She leaned her head on my shoulder, a peaceful, contented smile on her face. A smile I hadn't seen in years. It was as pure and beautiful as a rainbow after a storm. "Do you still think about the past?" I asked her softly. "I do," she nodded, not shying away from it. "But it's not with fear or guilt anymore. It's a reminder." She turned and looked at me, her expression serious. "One day, I'm going to tell our child to be kind, but to also know the difference between good and evil, to have the courage to stand up to injustice, and the wisdom to protect themselves." I held her tightly and kissed her forehead. I knew we had finally walked out of that dark, muddy mountain pass and into a life that was truly our own. Mark sends us packages of local crafts and produce sometimes. In his letters, he says that Redemption Creek, under new leadership, is trying to move past its dark history and is developing ecotourism. He used the restitution money to build the Danny Sullivan Library at the local elementary school. There are no more ghosts or secrets in our lives. No more lies or betrayals. Only sunlight, the sea breeze, and our shared hope for the future. We sat together on the sand, watching as a new sun burst forth from the horizon, its golden light spilling across the ocean and washing over us. This, I knew, was our real peace. This was our good fortune.